Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Breer, and welcome to episode 23 of the 11FS FinTech Insider Breakfast Show, brought to you this morning by our good friends over at MyTech, who provide tomorrow's identity verification for today's uncertainty. In this show, we bring you the best and the brightest from around the fintech and banking landscape every single weekday straight into your homes at 8:30 BST. Today, we're super duper thrilled to be joined by Alex Frean, who is the head of corporate affairs over at Starling Bank. Today, what we're going to be doing is talking about everything that Starling is doing and in continuing to support its customers in pretty tough times, I have to say, as well as the impact of all of the new product features. I mean, I think we can probably talk for about 4 hours, Alex, on the new product features that you guys have been doing. As always, guys, though, we love the questions and the comments, so keep those things coming through on LinkedIn, and we'll weave them into the conversation. I mean, if you know anybody who should be watching this right now, because I mean, what's anybody doing? It's 8:30. You're stuck at your homes. Nobody's got anything better to be doing than watching us, have they? So tag them in the comments, get them in as well. Let's make sure we're supporting the community as much as we can. Alex, thank you so much for getting up early and joining us. How's it going?
It's really good. You know, we're busy at Starling. We're working really hard, and I think during these weird times, being busy is a wonderful antidote to all the stress and uncertainty.
There's definitely something to that, isn't there? Taking your mind off it and sort of keeping everything sort of moving forwards is good, isn't it? You know, it's amazing how quickly it's getting around to 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and then you know, life takes over again, doesn't it? But how are you finding working from home?
I'm fine. You know, I think like a lot of people, we're finding at Starling that we're being incredibly productive. And, you know, when we start contemplating life after lockdown, whenever that is, we are hoping that we can take a lot of the practices we've developed in these last crazy few weeks and see how we can apply them to our post-lockdown work practices.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, there's a few things that definitely, when we do get back to the office, I hope I remember to kind of keep all of these things going. Genuinely, I think I've done more exercise in the last 4 weeks than I did the preceding 6 months. But how are you sort of finding getting into a routine? What are you doing on a daily basis that sort of keeps you going?
I really stick to my routine very, very tightly, and it starts off with the wonderful Zoe Anstey's yoga class.
Very good.
For those who don't know, Zoe works with David at 11FS. She happens to be a yoga teacher, and she's running a Google Hangout yoga class from 8 to 8:30 every morning. And it's energizing and gentle, and it just stretches you and gets you sort of all flexible for your day. So that's now, I'm missing it this morning because I'm here.
So I mean, thank you for making that sacrifice. I know I'm going to get shouted at by Zoe a little bit later on then for taking one of her classmates away from her, but it is good.
I'll practice. We're doing crow pose this week, so I'll have to practice after this. So that's been really good. And then we just plow straight into what one of the things that we have learned at Starling. We knew it before, but we've got much better at it during this emergency, is the importance of really stepping up our internal communications. So I am hosting thrice weekly, i.e. 3 times a week, live video chats with our founder and CEO, Anne Bowden, and with other executives. And we do that Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9:30 for 15 minutes. And it's just me talking to them, putting questions from members of staff. And pretty much we've said there is no question that we would not answer. And so far, we've managed to stick to that. And I think we do that 9:30. It helps people start their day and brings us all together. And it's been a very good way of communicating what's going on at the top. You know, we're missing that sort of chat that you have in the kitchen while you're making tea and where word gets around. So that's been very, very effective, and people seem to like that. And we record it and post it on a Slack channel for those who aren't able to see it because they're in meetings. So that then punctuates my morning, and then it's straight into our regular meetings. I've been doing you know, wall-to-wall video calls like everybody else, but I've been trying, not always succeeding, to take a lunch break. And we wrap up the day with a senior meeting around 6 o'clock. So it is quite regimented, but helpful for that.
Yeah, and because of that, I guess, you know, time just flies by at that point, doesn't it? I'm definitely finding you know, putting lunch in the diary and trying to protect it as much as possible is important, because I mean, I've said this to a few people. I mean, when you're physically sat in exactly the same space, you know, especially when you've got the curtains drawn like I have, then you know, you can literally stay in the same spot all day, can't you, if you're not careful? So a bit of time. Well, I mean, you're starting your day a lot healthier than I am with the yoga. So getting that going and having that energy for the rest of the day is really important, isn't it?
Well, it's good for your back, actually, because that's the worst thing about sitting down. Yesterday, I took some of my meetings standing up. I just couldn't stand it anymore.
Where in England are you?
I am in lovely Dulwich in South London. When the lockdown happened, I happened not to be in my own home because I've got the builders in my own home, and my house is a pile of rubble which cannot be finished because all the stuff that's needed to build it up again is in builders merchants. It's all locked up. So I'm staying with my brother and his family in Dulwich. I feel very privileged. It's absolutely lovely here, and they've even got a teal coloured room for me to work in.
Did they do that on purpose to prepare for you?
Especially for me, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that's really good. I mean, I should say, you know, welcome to everybody watching this morning. Loads and loads of people kind of joining in as always. So Martian, David, Damon, Benoit, Raoul, Charles, Catherine Ann, good Alberta. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us every morning. If you've got any questions for Alex as we go through this, let us know what they are, and I'll kind of get them into the chat as we go through. So lots of sort of new capability being launched at Starling, Alex, over the last couple of weeks. I think we'll maybe get into that in a second, but I mean, I love your background. I mean, I think I was saying this to you before when I sort of had a good look at what your sort of background was before. But journalism for me is such a multi-tool skill of weaving things together. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you did before Starling?
Absolutely. So I joined Starling in April of 2018. I had been prior to that at the Times newspaper for 25 years, and prior to that, at a number of other papers. At the Times, I had a lot of different jobs. I moved around in my specialisms. Latterly, I was a business columnist. I focused a lot on the tech industry. I was a foreign correspondent working out in New York and Washington, DC. And again, that was focusing a lot on tech as well. That was after the financial crisis, so there was a lot of banking as well. So I'm not a banker by background, but I've written a lot about banks, particularly the big investment banks, and I've got my views on them and on the banking industry and how it needed to change. So I feel very privileged. I was also a general reporter, so I've done, you know, natural disasters, murders, you know, coroner's courts, all the normal reporting stuff that you do. And I feel very privileged. It's a great life. You work to very tight daily deadlines if you're on a daily paper, and you learn to assimilate facts very quickly and then churn them out in a digestible form. So a lot of those skills are quite handy. And the most important skill, of course, is getting people to tell you stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's an interesting one because your point there about actually making things digestible. Actually, most banking organizations have kind of lost that skill set. Actually, translating, you know, legalese or regulator speak into something that consumers can actually understand, which is something that I think you at Starling do really, really well. Which is, I mean, talk to humans like humans, right?
Yeah, words matter. Words really, really matter. And, you know, we focus a lot on our tone of voice. I know that the other fintechs do. I know Monzo does this as well. They're very, very good at it as well. And we have, in the light of the current emergency, sort of taken another look at our tone of voice and try to see where we can avoid some common pitfalls. One of the things that has become a pet hate of mine is the phrase "during these difficult times" or "during this emergency." We know you're all struggling during these difficult times, and we're hearing it. The number of emails I've got that open with that line, and that has become meaningless because it's just so oft repeated. So we're trying to keep our language relevant and not hackneyed and practical.
Yeah. And like I say, that's an evolving thing, isn't it? The wave of emails that I've had from, I think, pretty much every vendor I've bumped into ever in my entire life at this stage. Then you get that thing, and then, like say, words lose their meaning given they're sort of being overused. But maybe if we sort of go a little bit into the stuff that you guys have been doing over the last couple of months, then. So actually, if we look particularly at the connected cards side of things, we had Anne on, I think it was last week. I mean, I'm struggling with what day it is and what week it is, if I'll be perfectly honest with you.
It's
so it could have been like,
and it's Earth Day today. So,
is it? Okay.
Yes.
It's good to know. So it must have been last week then that we had Anne on, last Monday. She talked a little bit about everything that you guys have done with the connected cards side of things. But for anybody who wasn't on that, do you want to give us a bit of an overview of what connected cards is, and then if we can maybe get into how that's going right now?
Absolutely. So the connected card is something that we're really, really proud of. It's a second card that you can attach to your Starling account, and you can give it to a trusted person who may be doing your shopping for you or looking after you if you are self-isolating. So it's a product that's really, really relevant and pertinent to our times. It's got certain security features attached to it so that people can't abuse it. They can only spend it in a store. It can't be used for online spending or ATM withdrawals. You can only have a maximum of £200 on it. It has its own PIN, and it has proved to be very popular. And it's something I'm really proud of, because we were trying to think, how can we do something that is really, really relevant in these times? So it's been launched for 2 weeks now. We've issued about 12,000 of them. We issued 1,000 in the first 4 hours, I think it was. What's interesting is, you know, we had this very specific use case that it was for people who are self-isolating, but in the feedback we've got, people are using them for other things. If you were gamblers, for example, have told us this is a very good way of supporting people with a gambling problem. If you allow your partner or significant other to have the main account and they give you a connected card, you can't gamble with it. You can't take cash out to then place a bet. And you can only have £200 on it at any one time. So it has got other uses that we didn't envisage, but that our customers have told us they're using it for.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, you know, online the response to it has been really, really positive. You know, we've seen people saying they're using it for, you know, child accounts, to an account to give, like say, give access to their neighbour to go and get them the, you know, milk and bread that they need because they can't leave the house. It's amazing, isn't it? Like you say, you put a tool into people's hands and they'll come up with all sorts of weird and wonderful things that it solves for them. But the fundamental of that is it's solving a real problem for people, isn't it?
Well, I think right now what all companies have to do is to stay relevant and useful. And if you can't do that right now, you're going to really struggle to stay in people's consciousness. And I think that after this is over, you know, things will change, and companies will look back and say, well, did we have a good war? Did we do the right thing? And that's why it's important to really look at what is the need, and then how can we meet it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think there will be a bit of a tallying up at the end of this process, and actually I think the organizations that have really helped people, I think, will stay in people's consciousness much longer than the pandemic will do. So like I say, I think this is a really good example of that. I mean, this is something that I think actually, I mean, given the context of the situation we're in right now, there is many use cases, but you know, when we get back to normal, whatever that is, then actually I can see many more use cases for this to sort of really expand. So do you think that people will, so you guys will keep this product going when we go back to normality, essentially?
Yes, I do, and I think we'll develop it with other use cases. You can imagine how it might be handy for a business person, for example, to give to employees. So yes, I do think
career advice at this stage. So David Kolb here saying, the time may be prompt for people to switch careers at this stage. So can you share your motivations for moving from journalism to finance? What was the bridge between those two things to get from the Times to Starling? Did Anne make you an offer you couldn't refuse, or was there another sort of bridge there?
No, well, what happened with this was I actually asked Anne to hire me. I interviewed Anne for the Times. I used to write the big Saturday interviews that we ran in the paper, and I interviewed Anne and was just blown away by her. Then I did what I always did as a journalist, was I went on the careers page before I wrote my article just to look at what roles they're hiring for, because tip for all journalists out there, it's a really good way of finding out what companies are planning to do next, to look at what roles they're hiring for. And I noticed that they were looking for head of communication. So I just rang her and said, would you hire me, please? It was a bit of an impulse. I had been meaning to leave journalism for years. I always promised myself I would, but A, I was having such a great time, and B, in my personal life, the moment was never right. I thought I would go into a not-profit or something that was a good cause. But for me, Starling ticks that box. I think it is a good cause. We are trying to do something good. So that was my rather impulsive and unusual move into Starling. I mean, one thing I would say is that there's never a perfect time to do anything. There's never a perfect time to switch careers. There's never a perfect time to get married, have a baby, buy a house, all these big things in life. We can sit and wait for all the stars to align, and we'll be waiting forever. And I think you have to be a little bit courageous sometimes, because you have to make it the perfect time sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about being bold and trying to take that opportunity, isn't it? I mean, prior to 11FS, I was at Gartner, and yeah, the risk you take by stopping a good career to follow something you believe in is a real risk, isn't it? But I mean, thankfully, it looks like it's turned out pretty well for both of us so far, isn't it? But we'll see what happens next.
Yeah.
So I guess moving on a little bit onto everything that's happening with the sort of CBILS accreditation, because I mean, this was a pretty big step over the last couple of weeks, wasn't it, in terms of being able to support business customers? How have you sort of seen the response to that so far? Because I mean, the public, but also the community, has been crying out for people who are a little bit more sort of fleet of foot, shall we say, to help distribute those funds. How have you found the response from your customers?
Well, I'll just catch you up with where we're at with CBILS. For those who don't know, this stands for the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. And these are the government-backed loans, government-backed to the tune of 80%, that accredited lenders are being asked to give to small and medium-sized enterprises. So Starling has been accredited as part of that scheme. We haven't yet started lending. We're still working with the British Business Bank that runs the scheme on operationalizing it. There's a lot of infrastructure and regulations that we are working through. So we hope that we will be accepting applications within days. I know it's frustrating for some of our customers who want the money now. And I think what's really important is that lenders get the cash into the hands of borrowers quickly. For some companies, this is an existential threat now. They've just run out of working capital. So we're working very hard at doing that. It's an imperfect scheme, as you might expect, for something that was thrown together very quickly in response to a dire situation. I think it wasn't particularly helpful the way the government oversold what this scheme is all about. I know, David, from following you on social media, that you are a great thinker on leadership. And one of the great tenets of leadership is about managing expectations.
Sure.
And I think the government did a very bad job at managing expectations around this scheme, because it is meant for companies that were already viable.
Yeah.
And so banks have to jump through all those hoops before they can lend the money, because if they don't, who's to say whether they are actually going to get that 80% guarantee if things do go wrong at the other end?
And I do think that is, I mean, it's definitely worth sort of pointing that out. Is that there's £250,000 that will be backed by the government, won't it, in terms of that initial part of it? But actually, anything over £250,000 then requires directorship of that organisation to take personal liability for it. Which, when you're talking about loans up to 5 million, I think it is, then actually, I mean, what non-viable business right now founder just has £5 million lying around to sort of do those things? It's quite a difficult scheme. But that's, as you say, and as I've said a lot on social, that isn't the bank's problem. That isn't something that you are setting that stipulation. This is a weird oversight, I think, in terms of how the government have sort of really set that scheme up. Because if they really were trying to help people, then they would be distributing funds through the banks or directly at this stage, which is very, very difficult to do, isn't it? But I personally, I've said, I think this is putting banks in a bit of a rock and a hard place, because I think they will be seen as not lending. But fundamentally, actually, if you lend too much at this stage, actually you're taking a huge amount of risk as an organization yourself, which the government have categorically said they will not back. So it's really difficult times, isn't it? And I think that viability, they use the word viability quite a lot, for a lot of small business owners who the business is their passion. It's like talking about whether your 4-year-old kid is viable. It's very difficult to not have a very sort of emotional conversation with them, isn't there? So it's fantastic that you guys have been signed up to the scheme, and hopefully, I think as the government realizes the gaps in the schemes and the people that maybe get left behind by these things in terms of not being able to distribute quick enough, hopefully they keep rectifying it. But because you guys can distribute, then hopefully that helps as many people as it can.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. We like difficult things at Starling. We're all a bit crazy that way. We like trying to figure things out, and we are determined to do a brilliant job at this. So we will give it all we've got. It's an imperfect scheme, but we will try and make it as good as we can. I'm not sure the government is actually listening to much of the feedback that's coming from the industry. I don't know, and yeah. I feel like it sometimes.
I mean, sadly, I think every decision is always driven by KPIs, and I think when they start seeing unemployment spiking so dramatically over the next couple of months because those businesses either haven't got funds quick enough or haven't got the right funds, then that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a number they're going to have to deal with to a certain degree. Some real great love for some of the comments that you're making. Andrew Grant says companies have to stay relevant and useful right now. Excellent advice, Alex. So lots of good love for the stuff that you guys are doing. And if we talk about a little bit on comms, because obviously, like you say, that's a great part of your background and actually what you're doing now at Starling. How have you found communicating with your customers sort of changing during this time? Because when we talk about being really specific with words, then there's a lot of fear out there, with both in the retail and the business sense. So how are you guys kind of shifting gears a little bit in terms of how you're communicating with your customers?
Well, we've always had 24/7 customer service, so with real humans, not bots. So for customers who are contacting us, it's business as usual. Although, of course, we have had to reevaluate everything because we are getting more people who are concerned about their finances. Not everyone is suffering financially in this emergency. Remember, a lot of people who are still in their jobs and who are working from home are actually probably better off financially because they're not commuting, they're not going to Pret, they're not going to Starbucks, they are staying at home and putting the kettle on. So it's not everyone's affected, but a lot of people are very badly affected. So with customer comms, we are really, really focusing on supporting things. And one of the key things is about listening to people, not overpromising, being very practical and realistic. But on the wider question of comms, it's a really interesting one because our comms include our PR, our marketing, our customer relationship management, and all of those have had to be reviewed in the light of the current emergency because they weren't all necessarily relevant, or they weren't quite right I come from that journalistic background, and it's very difficult right now to get noticed. This is not a financial crisis, this is a health crisis. Yeah. And that's what most of the media coverage is focusing on, as well as focusing on how the government is managing the crisis. So we have been working very hard at trying to just keep ourselves, our name visible. One of the things that we've done is we just put out some data on how customer spending habits have changed during the crisis. We were trying to think of, well, how can we communicate something that's relevant and interesting? So we looked at how spending habits have changed, and there's some very interesting findings there.
What are people doing then differently?
Well, they're all shopping online. Our online spending has, previously our highest day for online spending was Christmas Eve of 2019, all those last minute presents that were never going to arrive for Christmas Day. So I don't know why people bothered, but we've seen a massive spike in spending on PlayStation and Nintendo. Those have gone up 300%.
Wow.
Apple Store spending up 36%, Amazon up 39%, Argos up 49%.
Wow.
So that's really interesting. And the other thing that's happened is that transaction sizes have got bigger, particularly in London, where the average value of transactions has more than doubled. I guess that's because people are not spending on Transport for London or Costa. They are doing bigger shops at the supermarket, and that's good for us because those small, low-value transactions are not particularly profitable for banks.
Sure.
So yeah, it's been interesting, and I think that will change over time. I think that as the lockdown progresses, people's spending habits will change again.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a distinct correlation between the minute the kids were sent home from school and the spending on PlayStation and Nintendo, isn't there, for sure? But I think keeping tabs, like you say, on how people are behaving and actually what shops that they're spending in will be really, really interesting, because, like you say, the sort of impact of this is not just on us, but, like you say, those big businesses as well, isn't it? So, and it, like you say, it is an interesting one. In some households, actually saving money now because of, I mean, it used to cost me a fortune to get from Norwich to London every week. So actually that money now isn't being spent. So it's interesting. Some people might be in a situation where they've got a little bit more disposable savings to do something interesting with.
Can I just interrupt you there, David? Because sure. I mean, I do hope that people in that situation, and I'm very privileged to be in that situation myself, is that they go and indulge in a little bit of retail therapy at their local merchants, your local, lots of independent bookstores and the like are just transferred to online only, and they need us to spend our money. We all need to be spending our money to keep the economy going, actually. So if you are in that fortunate position, please just buy stuff from your local independent stores, because they really need that business.
Definitely. I think the minute the money stops moving is when the whole system breaks, isn't it? So if we can do anything more to support local businesses, then that's always the thing to do. Alex, the half an hour has absolutely disappeared. We'll definitely have to have you back on in the next couple of weeks. I mean, hopefully we're not stuck at home for too many more months, but if you get up early again and forego yoga for the morning, then I'd love to have you back on. Absolutely. My pleasure. All right. Well, thanks very much for joining me this morning, Alex. Where can people find out more about you and everything that you're doing at Starling? We're at starlingbank.com, and you'll find me on LinkedIn, Alexandra Frean, on Twitter @Freanie. Fantastic. All right, guys, that's all we have for you this morning. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and see you tomorrow, where I'll be joined by Bren Braben, who is former head of Level 39, amongst a bunch of other stuff, talking about what he's up to next and his journey through Level 39 and everything else that he's been doing. So if there's anybody else that you'd like us to have on, then feel free to drop me an email. I'm just david@11fs.com. Have a great day, everybody. See you tomorrow. Bye.